welcome to your first Twitter Spaces. Thanks for hustling to figure it out, and really excited and honored to have you talking with us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So, I guess really quick, like, why don't we just start off with, what's your story? Obviously, people may have heard of you as an NBA champion. You have a long history of amazing success in basketball, but you really caught my eye, this past year just because you've been really a voice of reason amongst some insanity that, is coming from Australia and other countries around the world.
Yeah, look, it's a crazy time. I think wherever you are in the world, it seems to be, cyclical where different countries are getting hit harder and then it goes lenient and then it gets hit harder. And we, in Australia, I've been here the last couple of years and throughout this, we were relatively unscathed last year to an extent. Like we had some lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't as draconian as it is now. Now it's, our politicians and our so-called quote unquote leaders are continuing with the division and the divisive talk and the fear mongering, and it's like it's gone up 10 notches, and now we're probably where the rest of the world was last year. So it's a pretty interesting time, and this is people that are vaccinated, are not vaccinated. That's not the issue to me. The issue is, the coercion and the mandates of what they're doing. They're not giving people a choice. Yet our Prime Minister gets on stage and says that it's, completely a choice when, it isn't. Like, I know a lot of friends that were losing their jobs or about to lose their jobs if they didn't buy into it. So, I mean, my position's clear. I'm all about choice on the matter, and if you want to get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. I think that's what it should be. But in Australia, it's gone. We're almost at 90%, in some states, and as a country, we're almost at 80%, which is, I think they're pretty much close to top five in the world as far as vaccination rates, and we still have lockdowns and all the rhetoric around it. So pretty disappointing.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about, and we definitely want to talk about what's happening in Australia and around the world, as the majority of the conversation here. But just to create some context, like, have you always, kind of, been a voice fighting for freedom and choice, or has that kind of been something that has really been pulled out because of what's happening recently?
Oh, look, I've always been pretty outspoken. I mean, I'm not one to shy away from giving my opinion on issues that, I might not be an expert in, but I'll give you an opinion. I might not be always right, but I've always been comfortable with, if somebody asks me a question, I was always taught to try and answer it to the best of my ability. And at times, like I said, I'm not always right. So I've always been okay to put, put whatever I've got out on the table and live with the consequences, whether it's controversial or not, whether it's political, whether it's social causes, whether it's, whatever, right? So this just followed suit. And I guess coming from a working class family that, didn't have a lot growing up, I think all I could think about during these lockdowns and during these restrictions and all these things going on was, what would I have been like as a child growing up in a working class family with these restrictions? Like, how would I have lived? How would our family have lived? How would my father, who was a mechanic by trade, which wasn't deemed essential, or, no one's really driving when there's lockdowns. So how do we put food on the table? And that's what I went back to. A lot of people were like, why do you care? You're a millionaire, just get on with it. But I wasn't really voicing, or I'm not really voicing concerns for myself. I'm voicing it for people that don't have a voice and that are basically, imagine being locked in Melbourne, my home city, is the longest days in lockdown in the world. As of today, they've had the most days when you add it all up. And imagine being locked in, if you're someone who's, not making a lot of money and you got two kids at home. So it's a, husband, wife, two kids in a 2-bedroom unit. You got your job that you're working remotely, and then you got to do your homeschooling with your kids, and then you got to get meals. Like, it's just like, the amount of stress and anxiety it's putting on everyday families is just horrendous. And I think that's, it's going to have a detrimental effect to the mental health of our society down the track that nobody talks about, because all we talk about, at least in Australia and the world, is case numbers, case numbers, case numbers.
So really, it's just kind of reflecting on how you grew up, and then having empathy for other people that might have be in your similar situation today. Can you talk about like the way that a lot of these protocols and mandates are being enforced? I've seen many stories and many people commenting how this is enforced a lot harder on the poor and working class areas, and if you're in the richer parts, you don't see a cop around at all, and that gives you a lot more leeway just as a baseline.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely an issue. I mean, look, the way the government's trying to spin it, they're trying to put it on everyday people to police it. And for the most part, there are people doing that. Like everyday people, by everyday people, I mean people that aren't in positions of power. It's just a business owner or whatever. They want them to police it. They want them to check papers. They want them to, really implement the mask mandates, whether someone's got an exemption or not. They're trying to really divide the public and have their Stasi out in the community doing it, and that's what's happening. There's people that are blind. There's a minority, probably, I mean, 10% of the population, maybe, for a rough estimate, that are buying into it, that are telling on their neighbours. There was a portion in during the Melbourne lockdowns, you couldn't have visitors for like, it was something like 18 months. Um, you could have four visitors, and then 2 weeks later it'd be hard lockdown, no visitors for 3 months. And like there was neighbours telling on their neighbours for having their grandparents over to see the grandkids because it was deemed illegal or deemed against the mandates, right? So the politicians have just created so much fear. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but the premiers of states, which is similar to the senators in the US, they were doing daily press conferences, and these things were getting tuned into by everybody because they were outlining the rules. What were the new rules? What can I can't do? Or like, can I go to the bar? Can I go to a restaurant? So people were tuning into that every day, and they were just creating so much fear and anxiety in people that everyone just on edge and telling on each other, and it's just a divisive time. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean the protocols implemented are one thing by politicians, but the fact that they started to get followed and policed by everyday citizens, that's when it becomes a bit more scary. It's just, yeah, you never want to get to a position where you're telling on your neighbour, and just, yeah, I mean the division and anxiety around the community, for the most part, at least in Melbourne and Sydney, is definitely an all time high.
I mean, I've definitely noticed that's just a trend in general is divide and really try to lean on individual citizens to pull out these mandates, and that's been something that is part of like the the horrible history of kind of like Nazi Germany, and that time in history where people were spying on their neighbors, and you didn't know who was part of the secret police, and that was a really dark time. And it sounds like now it's maybe not an ethnicity that is a scapegoat, but rather it's like the unvax that's this like scapegoat, and that kind of uh, string is being pulled by politicians, not just in Australia, although heavily in Australia, but everywhere else too.
Yeah, and it's just the wording the politicians use. Now it's becoming the whole marketing campaign around getting vaccinated is this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Well, it's not. You look at the numbers, it isn't. The way I look at it is if you've got someone that's perfectly healthy, they eat right, they exercise, they do all the right things for their body, and they're 35 years old, right? And they're unvaccinated, I think they're healthier than someone who's 45 and sits on the couch and eats Doritos and KFC and McDonald's and just watches Netflix all day and is severely overweight and obese. Well, which one's more healthy? And we can't even have those discussions in a civil society, right? It's like just because you've had the vaccine doesn't mean you're healthy and everything's perfect with your body. Yeah, the vaccine's meant to protect you, but as far as this whole spiel about the unvaccinated are the ones carrying on this pandemic, it's just very divisive, and the numbers don't back not the numbers I've read. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean the numbers I've read don't back those statements up, and they're just strictly to cause division within society and shunning what is now supposedly 10% of society in Australia, 20% in some states, but probably as a country, 10 to 15% of people are still unvaccinated. And the other thing is, man, there's a lot of people that are double vaccinated that don't support the mandates, and that's what's not spoken about. So our politicians are jumping up there saying, these anti-vaxxers, they're crazy, they're fascists, they're this, they're that. Well, I know, everyone knows people that I think the majority of people, at least in Australia, have got the vaccine because they were going to lose something. They didn't, the number one priority for them to get the vaccine was not, I'm scared of coronavirus. It was, I don't want to lose my job. I want to be able to go to my kids' sporting events. I want to be able to go to restaurants. I want to, that's probably reason one, two, and three, with health being four, which is kind of crazy. Look, there is a minority that, a smaller number, maybe 20, 30% that got it for strictly health reasons, but I'd argue the majority got it because they were coerced that they were going to lose something. And people, whether you agree that being right or wrong, I mean, that's probably the biggest debate with all this.
So, Andrew, I think a lot of Bitcoiners kind of, side with your opinion here, although in this kind of crazy clown world we find ourselves in, it seems like it could be even a minority opinion across the planet. But, kind of curious your interest in Bitcoin. I saw you tweeting out a chart, and, then I noticed that you followed me and potentially Bitcoin Magazine as well. So obviously, you're kind of keeping track of this digital currency. Kind of curious, what your history with Bitcoin is and your thoughts on Bitcoin, and maybe how that aligns with your views on human rights and dignity and freedom.
Well, yeah, I mean, just having another class of currency isn't the worst thing in the world, right? We know the Fed, at least in the US, and what they do, especially right now with the amount of inflation in the US. I was involved in Bitcoin very early, not early, but probably got involved in 2000, and it was roughly 2018. I bought some Bitcoin, a bit of Ethereum, and I just let it sit, and then kind of forgot about it for a year or two. Didn't really pay attention to it, and then I actually got to know Harel boss Volgaris very well, and he's a Bitcoin guru, like he's all about it. So he was in my ear a lot about, like, just get on it, keep getting on it. So much so that I basically have a daily buy set for Bitcoin. I don't really dabble too much in the altcoins. I just kind of stay with the original gangster in Bitcoin. And Harabos has helped me a lot with the way of thinking around it. So I have daily buys set every day at the same amount of money, whether it goes up or down. It just daily buys, which was a recommendation of his, something that he does. So he's helped me through it. And look, I like to diversify anyway. So whether it's whatever people think about it, for me it's diversification, and obviously we just don't know what's going to happen in the world, with with the way the banks are going, with China obviously has a digital ID. That's the concern for a lot of people with everything going on now. You might call it a conspiracy theory today, but 2 years ago you would have said it was a conspiracy theory that you'd need a vaccine or you'd lose your job, or you need a vaccine to travel the world. So that was a conspiracy theory 2 years ago. That's now, fact. So who knows? There's people think there's a big push for digital ID and linking your bank account and a currency to that ID. So I guess Bitcoin would be the alternative to that. But we all know how much governments are going after Bitcoin. So it wouldn't surprise me, especially here in Australia. Like, we're probably the most over legislated country in the world, with laws and tax laws and business laws and whatnot, that they'll try to implement something to screw Bitcoin over. It wouldn't surprise me. But that's kind of my short spiel into it. I'm not a heavy guru like you guys by any means, but I'm definitely involved and I follow it pretty closely.
That's amazing. And we also on Bitcoin Magazine don't really dabble in altcoins, and really do appreciate dollar cost averaging or daily buys into Bitcoin. So I think, your friend put you on the right path. I'm kind of curious, I think that, and we have Roman, who's Roman from Bitcoin Beach, in El Salvador, and there's been a big part of that story. But I'm kind of curious, like, what turned you, I guess, like, what woke you up to, the Chinese surveillance panopticon, and the fact that governments are kind of clamping down on freedoms. I feel like that's like something that most people in the world aren't paying attention to, and definitely not in Australia, as again, you've said Australia is heavily regulated in some pretty alarming ways to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I read a lot. I read about some of the most random shit ever. Like I'm kind of pretty well versed, not an expert in anything, but I can talk about most things if that makes sense. So I read a lot of news from around the world. The main thing is I've visited China multiple times, right? So I've seen the I guess their progression, they would call it, to their digital ID. I visited there back in the mid the what was it, 2006, 2005, 2006, and then 2008 in the Olympics. It wasn't as bad then. I went back in 2019, and it's a whole nother level now. Like we're walking into the basketball arena, and there's basically CCTV as you walk in the entrance. As soon as it hits your face, your ID's on the screen. That you know when you go to like an Olympics or a sporting event, you have those. You see the coaches and whatever wear those plastic cards on a little chain thing around their chest that is their ID. Well, as soon as you walk into the arena, it scans your face and you're on a screen with all your numbers on it. You're just like, holy shit! Like this is crazy, man. Like, and that's basically the technology they have around the streets. They have, they obviously get fines for jaywalking without actually interacting with an officer. It just shows up in the mail because they've got facial recognition that's linked to their ID, that's to their WeChat account. So you kind of see that, and no one really pays attention to it. Oh, it's just China, yeah, let them be or whatever. But like, that some countries like Australia would love to have that kind of system, and just people think that's crazy to say or hear, but politicians would love it. I mean, you'd have your thumb on everyone's forehead.
That's not crazy to hear, seeing what Dictator Dan is up to on his press conferences. You could tell him.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, and it's not just, yeah, he's the worst. Then we've got there's not one politician here that I trust for their word, like that's in power, like not one state. They're power hungry tyrants right now, and every day they continue to surprise me with the rhetoric they're coming out with. But yeah, man, I follow the progression of where China's gone. My family, where I'm Croatian descent. My parents are both born in Croatia. My grandparents, they migrated during communism, so we were unfortunately on the wrong side of the Communist Party. We weren't with the what was going on. So if anyone who's read about communism, you're either with us or against us, and if you're against us, you're you're in some shit. So my great grandfather got thrown in jail. He got beaten by the military police in front of his house and neighbors multiple times for being on the alternate political party, essentially. And so they escaped that, in the 70s, and got out right before the next, the War of Independence, which was early 90s in Yugoslavia. So they're akin to these kind of things. And I guess when people, whenever you bring up, this is very similar to how communism was formed and started. People say, "Oh, you're an idiot. How can you compare it to this?" All I would tell those people is go and talk to someone who's migrated from communism. Don't talk to me about it or you about it. Go and talk to someone who's migrated from, the USSR or different parts of Germany or, Yugoslavia, whatever, right? There's a few South American nations as well. Go talk to them and they'll give you the answer. And everyone I've spoken to that migrated from a communism regime has said, this is how it starts, and we've seen this story before, every single one of them. But you get these kids that are, just fresh out of college that think communism's utopia and everything's great, and you've got these 40, 50-year-olds in Australia. In Australia's never really faced conflict on home soil besides what happened to the Indigenous many generations ago. There's never been a war here, so people don't know the atrocities of what a human being can put forward. And I think we're sheltered a little bit. We've been a lucky country for the last century, so people have no idea. But I guess that would be my one piece of advice. If you think it's not, go and talk to someone who lived it.
Chimbera, what do you have to say?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
What's going on, man?
We're doing great. Andrew, just for some context, Chimbera, again, is a community leader in Bitcoin Beach, El Zante, El Salvador, and his efforts were a big part of eventually Bitcoin becoming legal tender in El Salvador. So maybe Chimbera will be, shy about, that kind of acknowledgement, but you definitely have done a big part for Bitcoiners, and I think maybe he can discuss, how Bitcoin has affected, the freedom of the people in El Salvador who have adopted it.
Nah, it's super exciting, Andrew. Really nice to meet you. It's super exciting to hear you talk about it, and really nice to meet you. And I hope you can come down here and we can meet you. But I jumping into the space because today I'm in the I'm in the place where it's gonna be Bitcoin City right now, and this is just like a paradise, guys. Like every place that I have been seeing today is like, wow, this is gonna be amazing, you know. And being here today and seeing this sunset that I'm seeing today, you can go to my profile and look at the picture that I just posted. And this part of El Salvador is amazing, amazing. And Bitcoin City is gonna be close to here, and I just wanna bring to you this crazy idea, right? But that is gonna be a reality, and I hope many of you will be here soon.
So, I mean, Chimbera, we've been talking about freedom and the lack of freedom in Australia. There's been a lot of criticism towards Bukele for kind of, what he's doing politically outside of the Bitcoin law. Um, are you confident that El Salvador and Bitcoin City is like going to be a free place for people to kind of have as like a haven, or is that something that it might be a pipe dream?
I just gonna answer you with this answer. I'm having the best time of my life here now. So get whatever you want, but I'm having the best time of my life. So
Awesome. I
so
mean, yeah, I was gonna say, later on in the conversation, would love to hear about, some stories about how Bitcoin has affected people in El Salvador and El Zonte in particular, your community, and maybe that would be something that is helpful. But I appreciate you sharing about Bitcoin City. We also have Tone Vase on stage. I actually shared a Tone Vase tweet from a couple days back, and I feel like it was really relevant to what Andrew was saying kind of regarding the people who have escaped communism and fascism and the Nazis, like they're starting to see signs of that again in Australia and in other countries across the globe. And I think Tone's tweet has a lot to say about that, and I know Tone has a history in Russia and can kind of reflect on that too.
man, I what I want to share with you is what I want to share to you today is like last week we have like a week, like when I was waiting for all the group or the Bitcoin the Bitcoin week, how we call it here in El Salvador, was like amazing. And I welcome everyone in El Sante and Bitcoin Beach, and I say like welcome to the future, like like it was so amazing to see everyone from all over the world, like people from Europe, from people from Africa, people from United States, people from Canada, all here using different products, using different wallets, using different companies, but having one thing in common and paying all the merchants here using the same monetary network to pay for all the service and all the products. And I said, like, this is how future will be. So if there is one place where I want to be, it's El Salvador. And it's not because I'm from here. It's because El Salvador is one of the places that is show the entire world that it's like, of course, we care that Australia is getting crazy, and I don't understand why. But El Salvador is saying like, welcome guys, come here, spend your sat here, spend your Bitcoin here, buy your houses here.
I really should have joined you guys in El Salvador last week. I was just too busy in Dubai and Europe, now back in the US as well. Hey, thanks for letting me say a few words. Andrew, a really big fan. I remember watching you. I mean, I'm a Bitcoiner that did escape the Soviet Union in the late 1980s. I was only 10 years old, but I remember it. And I basically turned my entire Twitter from talking only about Bitcoin to basically talking exactly what you're saying. Uh, just watching what's going on, and it's crazy. I have lost a lot of subscribers. People are very upset that I've turned my channel political, speaking out against everything with the mandates and the vaccines and you know and some other politics stuff. But this is just so much more important. And yeah, it's crazy. Like my parents also see the writing on the wall. Like America is like one of the last few places left because of our gun rights, and it's looking really bad. So just wanted to comment that I agree with you 100%. And this is literally what my Twitter feed has become instead of educating about Bitcoin, which is what it's been for like 6 years straight prior to the last year and a half.
Yeah, I think it's just to jump in real quick. It's important to talk about. Like we have to talk about it. And that's kind of the most disappointing thing is that everyone's kind of shunned from talking about it. And I guess I think you're complicit if you remain silent when you see injustices and human rights violations all over the place.
Yeah, no, I agree. And my last tweet from yesterday, there was like an article where American like politicians are advising people not to celebrate Thanksgiving. Like, hey, maybe you shouldn't see your family. Hey, maybe you shouldn't buy that turkey because it's more expensive. And that one really triggered me because my family left Soviet Union like the week of Thanksgiving, like the week of this holiday. So this is, no matter where I am in the world, I always try to come back to the U.S. Just this week. It's like the most important holiday where my family gets together because that's the week that we left communism. And I'm watching all these articles like telling people not to get together with their families. It's just insane.
I've got a better one for you. So there was so our version in Australia of like the Today Show or the morning show, like the ones you have in America that people watch while they're making their kids breakfast. We had a presenter here, probably the biggest rating morning show, and they did a 4 or 5 minute segment about how you should deal with unvaccinated family members, and like literally went into detail about like, well, you should maybe not invite them, you should confront them, you should make them feel. But it was just like this was on national TV, one of the highest rating morning shows, and I just could not believe it. Like that this was an actual segment on Australian TV. It was unbelievable.
Yo, what is going on, plebs? We're going to take a break from our programming to tell you about the resurrection of our print magazine, starting with the El Salvador issue. Starting this fall, Bitcoin Magazine will be available on newsstands nationwide and at retail stores such as Barnes and Noble. Don't want to get off your couch, though? No problem. You can also go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com. So skip the line and get each issue shipped directly to your front door with our annual subscription. I'm talking 4 issues a year that contain exclusive interviews and profiles with leading Bitcoiners, actionable insights on the state of the market, breaking news and cultural trends, along with powerful photos and artwork from the best artists in the world. Subscribe today and get 21% off using code podcast at checkout. That's PODCAST podcast at checkout.
Some of the stuff that we've been seeing out of Australia has been absolutely jaw-dropping. And then 2 things is the level of kind of criticism internationally is one thing, but then the level of acceptance by Australians is another. It kind of really speaks to how far gone the indoctrination is and how far away we are from 2019 mentalities.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, most of the people that are standing up and trying to voice their concerns and fight are there is a lot of Australians, but the majority I see is it's a lot of people that have migrated here that came from different situations that are like, we're going to fight for this. Like I said, I think Australia has been the lucky country for the last century. No conflict here, no wars, first world problems kind of thing. Like, everyone's got enough to get by. So there's no real issues. Whereas now it's starting to turn on its head and people are like, no, we gotta fight to try and, keep this country for why it was great. But to most everyday Australians that have never faced this or know anything about this, it's kind of foreign. Like, no, we'll be fine. It's Australia. Like, nothing bad's going to happen. We trust our politicians. They're going to do right for us. I think they're the people that, in a matter of time are going to be very, very surprised.
So I guess I want to get back to Chimbera and kind of hear and talk a little bit about like jurisdictional arbitrage, the idea of like moving states, trying to go to places that are going to respects citizens more than Australia, some states in the U.S., Europe, that kind of thing. But I want to hear about like what's happening on the streets in Melbourne and some of these other major cities that have really been locked down for a while. What percentage of Australians have started to really question what's going on? And, I guess, again, this is stuff that's not really covered at all on mainstream media here. It seems like, they'll talk about some protests, but they definitely won't talk about COVID or lockdown protests. So what's happening on the streets?
Yeah, I mean, last weekend we had, I think it was close to a million total nationwide, around about there. Might have been 700,000, but we had 700 to a million people nationwide. So we had a couple 100,000 in Melbourne, a couple 100,000 in Sydney, and then every other small city had numbers, right? So it's not very well publicized. Generally, if it was a protest for any other social cause, it'd be front page news. It's kind of you gotta get 3 or 4 pages into the paper, or you gotta scroll down the website to find it. But there is a lot of people. Like I said, there's people there that are. It's a mixed group. You've got, like I said, I'm from Croatian background, so the thing that really caught me was a friend of mine sent me a live feed. There was everyone who doesn't know should look it up, but the Croatian and Serbian communities, not the best of friends historically. Massive war that ended early '90s. During these protests, there was 2 people one with the Croatian flag, one with the Serbian flag, walking hand in hand. So to see that kind of stuff at these protests, and the media, politicians double down. They're calling these people, right wing fascists, Nazis, anti-vaxxers. And you talk to some of these people. I know people personally that have gone to many of these protests. They're people that were apolitical. They didn't care about politics, left or right. All they cared about was, I want to go work, I want to come home, spend time with my kids, work 7 till 7 during the weekday. On a weekend, go fishing, go surfing, go for a holiday with the kids, go out to eat, go to their sport. I'm happy with that life. They now they're invested. They're like, no, I'm going to go stand up for. But you look at what the media's putting forward to portray these people for the most part. Even just the wording they use in articles, anti-vaxxers, they're not. There is some people there that are anti-vax, correct. There are some people there that, probably are on the more violent side and ready to create civil disobedience. I agree with that, a small percentage, but the majority of these people are everyday working families who are not Nazis, they're not fascists, they're, looking at, we've been in lockdown for almost 2 years. Our mental health is declining. I can't pay my mortgage. My kids are struggling because they're 6 years old and doing 10 hours of schooling via an iPad or a computer. They're these people, and that's where the media is somewhat being complicit, because they're not telling the whole story. They're trying to, label these people as villains when they're not. They're not villains. They're standing up for what's right. But I mean, our politicians then say, well, even when the protests happen, that's a small number of our population. But there's, like I said, there's people there that have had both doses of the vaccine. There's people there that have had 1 dose. There's people there that have had none, and they've all come together. But unfortunately, for everyday people that just watch the media and think that's gospel, you look at them like, oh, they're the reason why we're still locking down. They're the reason why there's still a pandemic, it's just absolute sensationalism at its best, and it's just factually wrong.
Andrew, if there is any place that say welcome, it's El Salvador. Guys, if there is one in this Twitter space that don't feel representing for any country, come to El Salvador. Come to Bitcoin Beach. Come to El Sante. Come to El Salvador. This is your country. This is your place. This is where you need to be right now, guys. I'm right
So,
now where it's gonna
Chimbera,
be. This
Chim-
I'm right now where it's gonna be Bitcoin City. I'm watching like an amazing sunset, and I say this is a paradise. Like, I'm gonna post a picture, and I need to leave now because I'm here with some friends. But I'm gonna close saying this: the Bitcoin Beach team wanna go to the Bitcoin conference in April in Miami, and I wanna talk to Bitcoin Magazine that I hope we can have some ticket to
yeah,
come
let's make it happen. Just
to the
DM me,
conference.
Chimbera. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I want to turn it back to Andrew. Andrew, like, what are your thoughts in terms of like leaving Australia potentially, going to a place that respects people's rights a little bit more? and that kind of idea. Obviously, that's a very popular idea amongst Bitcoin people because Bitcoin is global money. It is fungible and usable and liquid everywhere, and it enables people to kind of take their property and leave. That's like one of the features. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And if the future might force that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. It's easier said than done. I mean, our issue is we have children. We have 2 kids. One starts school next year. I think that's a huge reason why people can't just get up and leave. Look, I have alternate escape routes if needed. If this gets any crazier, I have different options that I can look at. But I mean, El Salvador might be the answer because you look at Croatia. I've got a passport. I'm a citizen of I've got citizenship of Croatia, so that's a possibility. But now you look there, and they've just, because they're part of the EU, they're starting to follow suit with Austria and Germany now. They've implemented the pass, whereas their president only 3 or 4 months ago they got to 50% vaccinate the population and said, "No, we're done. This is enough. We're moving on. Everyone who's got it, everyone who's wanted it has got it. It's time to move on." So I thought, shit, they're doing the right thing. They're getting on with life. But now we're hearing that they've implemented passes just to get in hospitals and get medical help and treatment. So the problem is, it's like, where do you go? And all it takes is if you move for political reasons in this day and age, it's a little bit different than back in the day. It could change on a whim. You look at how the US, every state's different now with different rules. So you move somewhere. Let's say hypothetically you move to Florida, which is great now, and then in 2 years someone else gets in who's more into the tyrant type stuff, and then you've moved your whole family, and then that changes. So that's a concern with moving on a whim. I agree with Bitcoin. It's much easier to just get up and go. But I think for most people would move right now. I know people in Victoria, Melbourne, which is a state of Victoria, that would get out, but they can't because of employment. They've got a mortgage on a house. They've got kids in school, kids with friends there, family. That's what draws people. If I was single or it was just myself and my wife, probably a different conversation. But people have to remember that when you set up your life somewhere with children and that it becomes much harder, and that's where the government and society really has you. You can't just pack a suitcase and leave. But I guess on the flip side, debating myself is how long do you wait? Do you wait till it's so bad that you can barely get out? That's the $1 million question.
It's definitely extremely hard, and I think within the U.S. there's areas with more and less confidence for people who want to move, and then internationally there's areas with more and less confidence. But I feel like even internationally there's really no safe haven that has really kind of presented itself. I guess El Salvador, the Bitcoin city, and kind of what went down there last week kind of might be an answer, but I feel like there's definitely a lot of questions still there. I see Q,
especially
you're
first
raising your
world,
hand.
especially
Yeah,
first
for
world.
first
Sorry to cut
world,
you
it's
off.
like it's pretty much just the U.S. or like maybe some island. But yeah,
But the
100%.
first world's essentially they're the countries that have been hardest hit with tyrannical senators and premiers and prime ministers. You look at Australia, you look at US for some of the states in the US. England's been hit pretty hard. Canada, Germany, like it's generally first world countries. So I actually heard someone talking the other day that if you've got if you're pretty well off or have a decent income or a decent net worth, that going to a second world, third world isn't the worst thing because you can live a very good life there. And they've got bigger issues than COVID, so it's not as tyrannical there, which I thought was an interesting point of view to hear,
No, 100%, 100%. I mean, I feel like Mexico stands out in North America to me, but yeah, it's definitely a hard, like, especially right now, there's no clear answer.
Yeah, I'm with you on Mexico. I've been looking at Mexico myself. Yeah.
I see Q, you're raising your hand. What's up, my man?
I just wanted to chime in and kind of ask Andrew a little bit more on the Australia side of things. What is the access to testing, if anything? Are there testing centers available, regardless of what your vaccine status is, or is that just sort of not even an option?
You mean testing for just if you've got COVID?
COVID testing, yes.
Oh no, they want you to test. They'll bring out a silver platter for you to test. If they can get their case numbers up and create more fear, they will roll out a red carpet for you to get tested. So that doesn't matter. So much so that they're mandatory testing people if you're in I think today a backpacker hotel in Byron Bay of all places. Byron Bay is kind of known as I would say a free hippie type town. A backpacker hostel, there was a positive case there. They've locked down that whole hostel. They're not allowed to leave. They have to get mandatory testing and then self-isolate. So they go hard here with the testing. At one point we had Dan Andrews, who was just referenced before. He's a Premier of Victoria, saying that even if you have hay fever symptoms, you should still get tested. I mean, just absolutely bonkers. Like they want as many tests out there as they can get, and it shows how scared the people are, because you go to some of these testing sites and there's lines around the block on any given day, especially during hay fever season. Melbourne's notorious for hay fever. I get it every winter. And so if someone gets a little sniffle and their eyes are sore and they run and get tested, like, it's kind of crazy. I think, you got to know your own symptoms from hay fever, that you're not going to run and get tested every third day. But to answer your question, they love the testing, and they'll roll out the red carpet for you to boost those case numbers up so they can put it up on a screen.
And my assumption is all of the testing in Australia is free, or at least covered by the healthcare system that you guys have over there.
Correct. Yeah. So the health system covers your basic PCR test, but they are. Yeah. I mean, it's changing. Like the state of Queensland here has now, in Australia they're very strict on letting people back in. Even residents can't get back in. Well, now they've allowed residents back in. They have to be double vaccinated, and they have to home quarantine. This is people that actually own a home here that happen to have got locked out of the state, could not even return to their home. We're at month 6 or 7 now. Now they're making, if you're a non-resident, they're going to open for tourism. So Queensland in Australia, for those that don't know, it's a Florida/California tropical climate. It's kind of the tourist destination in Australia to get away for a weekend and get some sunshine. So they're allowing tourists to come in starting next month, have to be double vaccinated, but you have to pay for your own testing to come in. So that's been a huge issue politically here, because for a family of 4, it's going to cost $400, $500 for you just to get into the state, on top of your travel costs. So people are kind of losing their shit around that, saying, well, an everyday family, that's a lot of money just for a test. So they're kind of crazy here, and every state has different rules. It changes daily. You need permits to go everywhere. You have to get a permit to go state to state. So just crossing a border, you have to get a permit, and it's just not a good time.
Hey, Andrew, when you say tourism, do you mean like within Australia, or do you mean like from other countries?
Both. That you can't get. Well, this is a whole separate issue, but yeah, generally Queensland it's very big with, or was very big with, the Japanese and a lot of Asian migrants and holiday makers. But in Australia, Queensland is kind of the place you go to get some warmth. So, like, if you're working in the grind in Melbourne or Sydney or Adelaide or wherever, and you're like, hey, we want to get some sun for 2 or 3 days, or go for a 2-week holiday with the family, Queensland's kind of the place you go. This is like Brisbane, Gold Coast, Cairns. But your other question, so this is what's crazy. There's work shortages for whatever reason now. A lot of companies are struggling to find workers. The theory is because a lot have been stood down because they haven't taken the mandated vaccine, or both doses, or whatever reason. Some people have just protested it because they didn't want to be forced. There's a lot of companies that have employee shortages, so they're actually allowing international students and migrant work visas into the country, and they can actually get into some of these states that Australian people can't even get into. That's what's crazy. I tweeted about it a couple of days ago. So if you're looking to go state to state for a holiday, you haven't had your double vax and all that kind of stuff, you won't get in. But if you're coming on a student or a work visa, they might accept 1 dose. There's different rules for people coming from overseas. So, everyday Australians over here are kind of up against it a little bit, where it's like, I live in this country, I'm a citizen, and I've got less rights than someone coming in here on a work or student visa is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, no, I'm really going to miss Australia. I mean, I really enjoyed Brisbane and Gold Coast. I've been to all the major cities. I see Svetsky just joined as a speaker. That's where we met back in...
It was our honeymoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Andrew. We haven't met yet, buddy. I recognize your face because I've seen. I remember I saw that video that kind of went viral at on Twitter or Instagram or fucking something. I don't know. But so I appreciate you having the balls to fucking actually speak up because everyone else has obviously been bought and paid for, or is too cucked to stand the fuck up and actually speak the truth. So they hide behind a veil of political correctness, which is absolute fucking horseshit. It's the whole reason why we're in this mess in the beginning. Is we don't have any more strong men that are willing to get up and say something. The fucking women are braver than the men these days.
Yeah, not right.
Seriously, like my sister's in Brizzy, so I'm as you can probably tell, I got an Aussie accent. I grew up there. I got out in 2019. I've always said Australia was a dictatorship behind a veil, and people used to laugh at me and say, "Oh yeah, whatever, mate. Australia's one of the freest countries." And I don't know. I never knew it would get this fucking bad this quickly, but I got the fuck out in 2019, and when I saw what was happening in 2020, I decided not to come back, and I don't know if I'll ever come back at this point, because yeah, it's a disaster. Like my sister's in Brisbane, my mum's in Sydney, and my sister hasn't been able to visit my mum for fucking God knows, like a year now, I think. Like, well, whatever it's been, it's just fucking categorically ridiculous, and you know, it's a function of the country over time having built up such a capital base that it is wealthy enough to perpetuate what is effectively an economic fraud, which is just like any form of mandate is like it's economically fraudulent because you can't force everybody to do the fucking same thing just because some wannabe dictator said so. But Australia has the money to anyone that might oppose either gets appeased or censored, and
or fined. Yeah,
or fined, exactly. So they're basically robbing from one group, to fund, subsidizing things like the media. I was looking at, one of the recent announcements by the government where they're saying, oh, some sectors of the economy have been impacted really heavily. In particular, media has apparently been impacted really heavily, and they get a fucking 100% rebate on any expenses for the next 12 months. If that's not bought and paid for, I don't fucking know what is. So, like, I
yeah,
don't
and
know.
that just quietly slips by too. Like I reposted that and was like, does anyone else not see what this is? Like, you wonder why we're not getting the right messaging around who really is at protests, why we're getting the rhetoric, why they're doubling down on premiers and senators, rhetoric and divisiveness. Also, if you follow, I watched a few of these press conferences till I wanted to bang my head against the wall. So this was last year. I've stopped watching them completely. But watching those and just hearing the questions from these journalists with no follow-up, they actually catch some of the premiers or senators in a gotcha moment where they need a follow-up question and they won't follow it up. They just let it ride. And it's clear as day. They know that, they are getting funding from the government and they better toe the government line. And it's, to your point, you're right. It's that thin veil is clear as day. It's been removed now. And if you're not with the government, then you're in some shit and you're going to be pushing shit uphill, as they say. So I totally agree.
Yeah, well, this is why. I mean, I don't know. I guess you're in a bit of a Bitcoin hosted room, so I mean, I don't know what your position on that is, but this is why, Bitcoin is for like, we've sort of, at least Bitcoin as a innovation or as an invention or as a discovery more than anything else, its essence or its ethos has been one of defunding and making accountable the governors by the governed since the beginning. So it was like, it was always this insurance policy on if the world does go completely fucking mad, and if things get really, really bad, we should have a parallel monetary system, because in the absence of something like that, what is going to happen is the government issued money or the central bank issued money, which is basically they're part of the same apparatus, will make it such that if you want to exist in the world, you require money in order to, like, you store the product of your labor in a thing called money. You work for, the way you measure the value that you input into an economy, into a society, is money. And if they are the ones who issue that and can control it, they can tell you what you can spend your money on, how you can spend it, when you can spend it, how much you can spend. And if you are a dissident of some sort and you have the fucking alternative opinion, God forbid
Turn
that
it
you
off.
might think for
Yeah.
yourself, they turn it off.
Yeah. That's the conversation around digital ID in China. I mean, they're notorious for that over there. And like I said, that's a conspiracy theory to happen in Australia or the US one day or wherever, right? But stranger things have happened, and you can definitely. That's why
they're rolling out CBDCs already, man. There was I just saw it like in our Slack channel for the business. So I run a Bitcoin company in Australia, and like it was in our Slack channel yesterday. It was like one of the marketing guys was like, "Oh, it looks like the Australians are going to be pursuing crypto." And it's like a CBDC article, and I was like, "Mate, that's literally, I call it slave coin." Because that's effectively what it is. A central bank digital currency is fundamentally a fucking slave coin. They'll have the button to, to measure and track your sentiment and your opinion. And basically, should you think differently, we don't need any thought police anymore. We don't need any of the Orwellian crap. We have the money, and that is where they, defund you. Like it is the ultimate, like, in the art of war, to defeat your enemy, you go and you cut their resource lines, you turn off their food, you turn off their fucking water. Well, money is the path to getting that in a civilized society, and you hold everybody by the balls in doing so. This is why, like, people like Tone, people like, Bitcoin Magazine, and everyone, like, we've been banging on about Bitcoin for this reason. Bitcoin's not about fucking getting rich and, going to the fucking moon. It is literally freedom money versus slave money. And this is at the fucking core. We don't win this battle, we don't win shit. Like, I don't know, I mean, you're probably familiar with Pete Evans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, me and Pete are fucking good friends. We've done like a 12 series, 12 episode podcast series, like, on his show, and kind of taking him through the fucking rabbit hole of Bitcoin. It's like, this is the battle we must win. Like, well, this is the war we must win. We win this, then the tide turns. But until then, like, I'm in, as much as I'm surprised about what's happening in Australia, I'm actually also simultaneously not surprised, because when you have enough capital or wealth that has been built up over the last couple 100 years in Oz, you can erode that in the process of doing something that is completely fucking abhorrent to nature and to, like, natural law and to fucking freedom and everything. But you can fund your way into becoming a fucking dictatorship.
Yeah.
No, Alex, it's the speed. The surprising part is the
yeah.
speed of how fast it's happening. I wake up every morning, I look at my Twitter feed, and, like, I can't believe it's like I'm watching it escalate on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's the speed is one thing, and it's just people falling in line and accepting it and actually, policing it themselves, like I spoke about earlier. That's probably been my biggest surprise. Like, there's one thing that a mandate or a law gets passed by government, but it's another thing to have the people, implementing and policing that law that have no reason to, really. They're doing the government's bidding for them for free, and that's kind of my big concern, is how quickly people have just said, "Oh yeah, that's just a normal way of life. I've got to live with this because of the virus." It's like you're slowly eroding everything that's been built in such a great country. And I guess the other point I'd make around, why Bitcoin is important in what we're doing in the world is, I mean, I'm sure most of you have bank accounts, but I've go and withdraw some cash that's more than a few thousand. I couldn't believe it. I went and withdrew some cash about a couple of months ago, 6 months ago. I tweeted about this, and I got grilled by the teller. And I was like, I know, in the US, obviously they have the 10K law. We have a similar law here in Australia where they have to write you up if you're withdrawing large amounts. But I think I withdraw a little bit under 10K. I think it was 8 or 9K, for whatever reason, personal reasons. And the teller's grilling me like, "What are you doing with this money?" I said, like, "It's none of your business." Oh no, I need to know. I said, "Okay, I'm buying a used car." I said it with a smile on my face, obviously just being sarcastic, and like, "Yeah, I'm buying a used car." Then he goes on to grill me about, "Well, you know about fraud and used cars. Are you sure there's someone actually selling?" I'm like, "Lady, just, I want my fucking money. Like, I don't need to have this conversation with you." And that's when, you kind of realize that if you ever want to just mass withdraw your funds, like that they can put a stop to it if they really wanted to. And it was just really in your face alarming that I'm getting grilled by just some lady that's obviously just doing her job, but she's been mandated to do that by her bosses. To what are you doing with your money, and making me feel guilty about withdrawing my own money is kind of bonkers.
Yeah, we have a saying in Bitcoin called "not your keys, not your coins," and it relates to this: is, if the money's in the bank, it's not yours, buddy. It's it's the bank's, and they're giving you permission to do something with it. Like, and this is again one of the things about the essence around Bitcoin is that it's a bearer instrument, meaning that when you hold your Bitcoin, there is not a power in the universe that can tell you what to do with it, other than you. And that is why governments fundamentally hate it. Like, governments love crypto, governments love blockchain, governments like CBDC, because all of that stuff is manageable by them. The single thing on the fucking planet that they can't fuck with is a form of money that is, in essence, information and tied to the second law of thermodynamics, such that they can't fucking change it, corrupt it, adjust it, manipulate it, or anything. And they're fucking shit scared of Bitcoin. And man, it's the Achilles heel. Like, we need to get voices like yours in and around this, because the more people we rally around it, like particularly in Oz, I think literally the last thing, like me and Pete Evans, like I said, been banging on about this. I said, he's got to start building communities there which operate parallel to the banking system and everything. Like, if you guys can get some, local farmers markets and, people, fucking handymen and plumbers and, teachers and medical people, like if you guys can operate independently of them and use kind of Bitcoin as your mechanism for like, the government can't fucking stop you. A, and B, they won't know what the fuck you're doing, and they think that they got you by the balls, but they can't. Like, the more we can move Aussies off the dollar standard over there, the more you do two things. One is you become independent when they think you are dependent, but number two is actually you erode their tax base, because at the moment, if you're using Aussie dollars and if you're paying tax in Australia, you're literally funding your jailers. You are literally paying the motherfucker who's telling you to stay inside to ram cotton swabs up your nose, even though you've been fucking jabbed 36 times. Like, it's the dumbest shit on the face of the planet. And we're paying them for it, like, which makes it even more dumb.
My fellow plebs, the Bitcoin conference is back. Bitcoin 2022, April 6th through the 9th, is the ultimate pilgrimage for the Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin conference is the biggest event in all of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. We're leveling up and making this bigger and better than ever. I'm talking straight to the moon with the 4-day-long festival in the heart of Miami at the Miami Beach Convention Center. This has something for everyone. Whether you're a high-powered Bitcoin entrepreneur, a core developer, or a Bitcoin newbie, Bitcoin 2022 is the ultimate place for you to be with your people and celebrate and learn about the Bitcoin culture. So make sure to go to b.tc/conference to lock in your official tickets and use promo code Satoshi for 10% off. You want more off? Pay in Bitcoin and you'll receive $100 off general admission and $1,000 off Whale Pass. Those are stackable. So go to b.tc/conference and attend the best conference in Bitcoin history. Yo, my fellow Bitcoin lovers, have I got something specifically curated for you? The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium markets intelligence newsletter. This isn't some paid group shilling buy and sell signals. No, this is a premium Bitcoin analysis led by Dylan LeClaire and his team of analysts. They break down in an easily digestible way what is happening on chain, in the derivatives markets, and in the greater macro backdrop context for Bitcoin. This newsletter turns volatility into a joke. So hit up members.bitcoin.magazine.com and use promo code podcast for 30% off the deep dive. That's members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code podcast for 30% off. Divorce your pay group and learn why Bitcoin is the strongest asset by Dylan and LeClaire and his team.
Well, I guess the thing around Bitcoin for Australians to understand is, I mean, when they look at it, dollar wise, I guess the wild swings. That's probably what everyday Australians that don't really know much about Bitcoin, that's kind of the barrier you need to break down for them, because they look at it as like, well, it's worth 60K today, but then it's worth 30K tomorrow. How do I charge my plumbing services accordingly? Like, how many coins do I charge? Like, you know what I mean? So that's what I think puts a lot of people off here when they look at it just quickly. Because they relate it back to the US or the Aussie dollar, right? So it's, you know, that's a bit more stable, you know, so that's kind of the old school way of thinking. But I think that's a big problem that you face when you're trying to get people completely on that Bitcoin platform rather than having anything to do with the dollar.
Yeah, it's more around like the input and output costs. So if you have exposure to dollars on one side and Bitcoin on the other, then you've got to manage the volatility. And this is where sort of closed systems really work nicely. Is that if your input costs are measured in Bitcoin, and your expenses and then your earnings are also measured in Bitcoin, you actually don't get that volatility, because then what happens is Bitcoin becomes your unit of account. And the way, like, we've also got another thing that we talk about in Bitcoin is called stacking sats. So like we don't look at the Bitcoin price generally. It's like what we're looking at is the Satoshi value. And very similar to, like, I'm sure you've been to Bali, you go to Bali and you swap your dollars for your whatever the fuck, the Indonesian rupee or whatever it's called. And it's like you get a massage and it's 9,500 rupees. So like in the same way, you kind of look at it that way, and it's like a massage in Australia might cost $60, but it's actually about 100,000 satoshis. So that's what we sort of want to think in. And over time, like, what's happening is that the price per Satoshi is appreciating in relationship to the dollar. So what might be 100,000 Satoshis today is, going to buy you a massage today. In 10 years, it's going to buy you a fucking house. And unlike the Indonesian rupee, which, today, 9,500 rupees is going to buy you a massage. In the future, it'll buy you a spit in the face. Like, that one's going down in value, but Bitcoin sort of in value. And if we can kind of get, the unit bias and, more and more people moving across into a Bitcoin standard helps. But yeah, you're right. Like the fact that input costs are still measured in dollars, and, people still use dollars as the unit of account, means it's going to take a while for that to happen. But, this is part of that educational process, man. The more people understand to think in terms of sats, like, because that's the place that me and many probably people in this spaces at the moment think in terms of, like, when I go out and buy some food, and I pay $100 bill, I don't look at it in dollars. I'm like, fucking hell, that's like 200,000 sats that I could have fucking had in my pocket. But I spent it on food. So then, the next day I decide to fast, and acquire, more sats. So anyway, that's just, it's an educational thing. And I think, if people like you really get, deeper and more versed on Bitcoin, I think it'll really, you've got a lot of trust in the community. If you can discuss that better, like, man, yeah. I'll end on one final thing, then I got to run. It's like, Bitcoiners have nothing to sell you but your own freedom and sovereignty, and the difference with, governments and crypto and, all the other fiat legacy systems, that they have something to sell you, which is their fucking wares or their ideas and their stupidity at your expense. So, we need to do our part to kind of slap some people awake, hopefully.
Yeah, until the government here tries to, there's already been rumblings around Bitcoin's, it's a way to launder money. They've started that whole spiel. They did a little bit in the US, but the problem is in Australia, if it gets too big and we start going strictly Bitcoin and get off grid to an extent, the government here is going to do something about it. They're going to implement some sort of bullshit law or something to do with it. They'll try to ban it. They'll try to hinder it, and that's the issue we'll have in Australia.
Sort of, like, their capacity to ban Bitcoin is similar to their capacity to ban the number 0, or the letter A, or banning 2 + 2 = 4. Like, they can attempt to do that, but like the thing about Bitcoin, what it does is it transforms money into information. Information you can't destroy. So like, I could send you Bitcoin over Morse code. I can send you Bitcoin in a photo. I can send you Bitcoin in a fucking audio file. Like, they literally can't fucking stop it. And as like one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin on the way is it gets skin in the game from players at different levels of the game. So like, there's companies that are technically our enemies, whether it's media companies, whether it's banks or whatever. What's happening is their own survival instinct and mechanism will drive them to have to put some Bitcoin on their own balance sheet. Otherwise, they'll end up fucking obsolete. And in doing so, all of a sudden, they start to loosen their tie to the government, and they start to like be in a position where they're compromised. And that's what we need to do. So as Bitcoin infiltrates, it kind of takes our enemy's greed and it uses it against them, because they can either not be a part of Bitcoin and basically be left behind, because as Bitcoin continues to appreciate, like, mark my words, one Bitcoin will be enough for you to probably buy all of Brisbane in the next 10 or 20 years. Like, and I'm not joking. Like, people think, oh, Bitcoin's expensive at 60 grand. Wait till Bitcoin's 60 million or 600 million. Then, you'll know it's expensive. But,
Alex,
yo,
my name is 37 sats because I think 37 sats is generational wealth. So very bullish over here.
yeah,
For
well,
sure.
there we go. CK's probably even more bullish than fucking my ass is. But yeah, like, literally, that's what we're dealing with here. So these motherfuckers got no chance against us. What we want to do is we want to bring as many good people across to protect their wealth and become sovereign sooner rather than later. And let the fucking government be the last ones to adopt Bitcoin, because then they can clean our fucking toilets. And that's sort of the game plan. Yeah.
The playbook from Australia will be they'll label Bitcoin as Nazi coin. They'll implement a law that they'll implement some sort of mandate saying if anyone offers to pay for anything in Bitcoin, you should tell your local police officer or your governor and get them arrested. That'll be the next play here with the way our government is, man. I can tell you that much.
Well, they will. Then this is where strong networks come into play. Is like they'll do the same with cash. They'll do the same with Bitcoin. So what's going to have to happen is strong networks amongst good individuals need to be built now, so that you guys can do that. And as that starts to increase, what we need to do is we need to basically get economically strong enough to like. It's a multifaceted attack, right? So there's no like silver bullet where it's like the one thing. So it's like, as private individuals do that, as our own enemies do it, like as banks start putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, as large corporates put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, it makes it hard for them to fucking ban it.
Svetsky, I feel like there's a lot of complex game theory. It's going to be tough to chew through it all in this one sitting. So maybe there can be a side channel, but definitely appreciate the strong orange feeling you're bringing to the table. And generally speaking, like, Andrew, I think if anything that Alex is saying is like, there's a group of people that are coalescing around this monetary technology that really see the world in a similar way that you do, right? And are kind of fearful of the same trends and are trying to counterbalance it. So obviously Svetsky is very passionate about it, and hopefully that you can you can come over to this side, because you have a great message and platform that's very aligned, for sure.
Appreciate that, CK. Yeah, look, Andrew, if you want to hit me up afterwards, man, we should probably have a chat. Maybe we do a show together or some shit. But I'd love to discuss that further. Sorry, I kind of hijacked the fucking conversation. Came in swinging.
Classic. So I mean, I guess, Andrew, want to kind of give you back the mic, and I don't know how much more time you have, but I guess based on what just Svetsky spewed and the conversation so far, what do you kind of make of? I guess, what are your thoughts on really what's happening around the world, Bitcoin, what people can do about it? The people waking up. Are there people waking up as a reason to have hope? I know that's very wide ranging, but kind of want to let you pick and choose where you want to tackle this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of can go in many directions. There's a lot to talk about as far as that question. But I mean, the number one thing for most people is, just from a diversification point of view, is it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to just set some daily buys for yourself. That's a start. Like, if you, I guess, the biggest thing for people that aren't involved in crypto is taking that first step, and trying to make that jump. So you obviously invest some money a little bit early just to see and get a feel for how it goes daily, and then maybe set a buy, of whatever it is. It might be $50 a day, it might be whatever. That'll be a start. But look, I mean, I think it's going to be important. It's a, who knows what the future holds exactly. But I like the point of that, if we can get off the government's way of thinking and the government's teat, with crypto, with Bitcoin, I think it's the way to go, where you can kind of, like you guys said, if you need to pack up and leave, you don't have to pack a suitcase full of Bitcoin, right? You can just leave, and then you've got it, wherever you're holding it, I guess. So that's the main thing. But look, it's just a crazy time. I think there's a lot of people out there that are, trying to voice these concerns aside of Bitcoin. I guess just having people, use their voice is the biggest thing. That's been the most disappointing. It's not so much the people that are doubling down on government rhetoric and doubling down on division and trying to be the Stasi out there to police all this shit. It's the people that are keeping quiet through all this, like that are like, oh man, like if I say something, I might be affected, my job might be affected. I understand it to an extent, but the more people we have that will speak out, it'll then clearly show everyone that that's the majority of people. It's not the minority. It's the majority of people have these views, but everyone's just so scared. Political correctness. I can't go against the grain. My business maybe has a government contract, and that's all I'm seeing in Australia. That's what's silenced everyone here.
Yeah, 100% on that, Andrew. I refer to it as unconfiscatability. Like, that's my elevator pitch. Bitcoin is the first unconfiscatable asset in human history, something of value that you can store in your head. And the example that I give is going back to the Soviet Union. When my family fled Soviet Union in 1989, we were only allowed to leave with $100 per family member. Like, they even checked how much jewelry you're leaving with, and then they'll just take it at the airport before you go. So that's all you had, no matter how much wealth you had, $100 per person to start a new life at a new country. And Bitcoin stops all that. It's just all your wealth with you in your head, and nobody can stop it.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yep.
Andrew, have you ever heard of the book The Sovereign Individual?
No, I haven't. Good read.
That one is absolute fire, and it predicted a lot of things, including Bitcoin. It was published in 1997, but one of the other things it predicts are COVID style lockdowns for purposes of maintaining bureaucracies. So like that was published in 1997, and blew my mind when I read those words reading the book. So it definitely is a good read, and couldn't prepare people maybe for the future that's ahead. But yeah, that's a real good one. And being able to cross borders and take value with you, it's a huge thing. Like, I think, I was talking to a guy who was like, yeah, the Russian Jews would sew gold into their pants to, escape with value. And I was like, well, with Bitcoin, you can memorize 12 words and bam, so like, I feel like it's definitely a new weapon in our arsenal that, I guess the freedom arsenal that is just really a new, something that's never, existed before.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's easy. It's easy to take over with you. So it totally makes sense. I guess it's just more that conversation of how do you get the, the everyday Australian, the everyday American that has no idea about crypto, that gets their information from mainstream media. How do you get them on board to see, how important it can be and it is for the future? That's probably the biggest goal for it all, rather than, I guess, we, discuss it and know about it, know the pros. But it's getting those everyday people who are just not trained mentally. Like they're just it's new and shiny, and I don't trust it. And the government's always right, and the dollar is the bee's knees, right? So it's getting those people on board.
Yeah, on that one, Andrew, and I'm gonna bounce now and grab some dinner. But I was just gonna say,
Are you sure?
I don't think we need to get everyone on board. I think the people we need to get on board are the people who literally like are following you, following me, following Tone, following Pete Evans, like following, that kind of like Michael Senga and all that sort of stuff. They're the ones, because they're the ones who fucking matter, because they're the ones who are fucking have enough brain cells left to think critically for themselves. We're not going to wake up everyone. We're not going to wake up the sheep. We're not going to wake up the wannabe fucking, inferiority complex mini dictators who are fucking, telling you to, slip your mask up a little bit further up your nose so you can, you suffocate more. Like, the ones we need to wake up are the ones who are primed to listen. Like, I wrote an article a little while ago called it was about the remnant. So it's a biblical reference of like the small minority of people who are intolerant but awake and capable enough to think through things. They're the ones who we need to talk to, and we need to speak to them, and we need to speak to them in a manner that helps them frame and understand what this thing is. So because they already have a distaste for government, they already had a distrust, they already they don't want to be fucking slaves. A lot of the sheep want to be slaves. They want to, govern me harder, daddy. Give me a fucking 36 boosters. Give me whatever you tell me to do, right? We're never going to wake those guys up. So we want to focus on the ones we can. And I think, you're a prime example of someone who's got an audience like that, because otherwise those people won't be fucking following you, right? So that's kind of my 2 cents there. Would love to connect later, bro. Really appreciate everything you're doing down there. And yeah, man, I hope to one day come back to fucking Australia, but if I can help from here, happy to do my part, man, and glad you're on, the right side of history for this.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
For sure, bro. Thanks, everyone. I'm out.
Later, Sutsky.
Later time.
Bye. The article that he's referencing is called Isaiah's Job. Also a good read, and I think there's an audio version too. But yeah, Andrew, we got 15 more minutes on the calendar. You've been very patient with your time, so thank you so much for joining us. We have the only person on stage who hasn't, voiced a question or a thought is Marjorie. Marjorie, welcome. How's it going? Would love to give you the stage. Maybe you can ask Andrew a question, and then maybe from there we can do last words and close it out.
Yeah, thanks, CK. This is a really good discussion. I was actually listening to what you guys were discussing, and I'm kind of just like taking notes. I'm in Canada right now, and when I'm looking at what's happening in Australia and in Europe, I'm kind of just like so worried, because it seems like we are going to like the same path as Australia, where people are just like, unvaccinated people are unable to leave. So basically, I have until this coming Monday to make a decision whether I'm going to stay in Canada or leave because of, because of my medical status, because I'm not vaccinated. So like, what would you say to everyone here right now? Because, I'm seeing there are some Canadians in this discussion right now. Like, what would you advise them? Would you just tell them, wait it out, stay there? Because there are people who are like telling me, I don't want to leave because I have family here, I have a job here. What would you advise to them, Andrew?
Well, that's the toughest question. I mean, people have different kind of things that keep them drawn to where they are, and that's the hardest thing. I mean, like I have a lot of friends and family for that matter in Melbourne that I wouldn't say they were anti-vax. I wouldn't say they were pro-vax. I think they were in the middle. They were like, hey, like, I don't know if I want to get this because I don't know the long-term implications of taking the vaccine. I'm hearing mixed reports about one not working, and then I need a booster. Like, so people were just kind of on the fence, right? And those people were, all have taken it because they're going to lose their job. Where I do know a few people that have just got up and left and gone to Europe or different parts of the world. It's a hard one for me. I've got 2 children, like I said, so just to pack up and leave is kind of the last resort that is on the table. For me as a last resort, if things go really crazy, like I for instance won't have my children wearing a mask in school. I'm not gonna push. My kids are 3 and 5. Like they're not getting the vaccination, the COVID jab. Like, no way. Not right now anyway. Until I know that it's more than safe and effective than any literature we've got now, right? Which will be years and years and years away. So for my children, not going to happen. So I don't know how to answer that because, like I said earlier, you could move somewhere that is great now, and then in 6 months' time, a government official gets overthrown and someone else is put in place, and then they turn the wrench on you and the people there to a completely different law, and that's exactly what's happening in Croatia. Like, we had thoughts about going over there for a bit. It was especially when we heard the president's speech, 4 or 5 months ago now, saying, like I said earlier, we're at 50% vaccination rate. We're done. Unfortunately, life goes on. Sometimes people are going to die. It was kind of an honest speech, and it was kind of what most people wanted to hear. Where you're like, if you're sick and vulnerable, and if you're elderly, you need to protect yourself, and if you're young and healthy and fit, you need to get back in the community, and we're getting on with it. But now, you fast forward 4, 5, 6 months, they're turning the wrench. They're part of the EU, so that I'm sure the EU got involved with putting pressure on them to where now it's, oh no, you still need a pass. You need a COVID pass to go anywhere, basically, or you need to do a test beforehand. The only good thing they've got there right now is if you've had COVID, they honour that as essentially a vaccine. Like, my auntie's had COVID over there, and she just got papers saying that she's had COVID, which gives her 6 months to not get the vaccine. But it's a tough question to answer. I don't know what your situation is, family-wise, kids, all that kind of stuff. But you just got to be careful that you don't move somewhere strictly for political reasons, and then the same thing happens where you're moving.
Yeah, the proof of recovery, it's really frustrating because I have that as well. But not enough places accept proof of recovery as good as a vaccine, when in reality it's better. And what you were saying about like regimes change, I spent early in the year, I went to Tanzania and Zanzibar because their president was very anti-COVID. Like, he didn't even want their people being tested. And I was there for like a month, and then the president magically has a heart attack at 61 years old, and the new president puts in all these mandates, and there goes Tanzania.
Exactly, and that's the concern. That's I think the move would be when it really gets to the point where you have no other hope. That's when I would consider getting out. But if you can just kind of tread water, I mean, I know you said you're losing your job most likely, but that's the tough
Mm-hmm.
thing. You just move somewhere, and then some other asshole gets in power that is as tyrannical as any other country, and then you're like, holy shit! Now we've uprooted my whole way of living, my whole life, whether you had kids, and then the same thing happened there, right? I think the world is kind of in a bad place right now. Where, I mean, I'd hope we'd have more answers in 4, 5, 6, 7 months' time, where you can kind of start to navigate who's getting on with it and who's not. But it just seems like whenever you think a country is getting on with it and moving away from COVID zero type mentality, that then a month later it flips back. It's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'm totally with you with that. And that's also the reason why I've been on the fence. Like, I don't have kids. I work remotely, but I'm very family oriented, and I don't want to get to a point where, like, let's say I'm in Mexico or I'm in El Salvador, and then something happens in Canada and I'm unable to help my family, right? Even though they're vaccinated. It's just like where things are going right now. For me personally, I feel like it's much more important to be there for my family. But that's also because of my personality. Like, I want to be reliable to the people I care about if, shit happens, right? Um, but yeah, but then at the same time, like, I do see, like, why a lot of Bitcoiners I know, like here in Canada, have moved out already. They've already left. But I do ask them also, I'm like, what happens when the country where you move to um, becomes tyrannical also, right? They start applying all these mandates as well.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
some
yeah.
point, like, are we gonna get to a point where you have no more places to run
That's the
to?
problem.
So
Yeah,
either we fight, yeah, either we fight, okay, we fight strategically and effectively, or we just keep running away until we have no more places to run to. So, like, what is like the most strategic and effective way to handle this? Like, what, this is gonna be one of my questions to the Bitcoiners here, like, CK, Tone, um, like, what do you guys think about, like, Bitcoiners getting together, you know, um, taking a hold of the narrative, like the mainstream narrative around economy, around what's inflation and everything that is going on right now. Um, what do
I
you
feel
guys
like we're
think about that?
trying. We're trying. But it's yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. You're asking hard questions. It's like a lot of the Texans would say, retreat to Texas and make that a stronghold. But obviously not everyone has that option. And I think like, Francis Pouliot is an example of someone who he was in Puerto Rico and then, he kind of got rug pulled in terms of, the regime or the policy change. So
Costa Rica.
sorry, Costa Rica, I apologize. Costa Rica. Puerto Rico's in the US. And that all has questionable situation. But I mean, it's I feel like we're still in early days, and I feel like there will be like an outlet because there's just too much demand for a haven, and hopefully that can be a place for people to kind of use defensively eventually. Like I definitely am optimistic long term, although the short term is definitely pretty hazy.
I've been traveling all year. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, you're right. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll go next.
Okay. I mean, I've been traveling all year, and I mean, Zanzibar and Tanzania look promising no more. So that's over.
That's pretty
Mexico is still
crazy.
good. Yeah. Mexico is still good. I really like Dubai. Most of my year has been spent in Dubai. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I mean, they are kind of forcing, not forcing, but they're kind of almost forcing all of their like labor force, which is mostly India and Pakistan and Africa, to get vaccinated to keep their job, like drivers and all the employees. But they're very capitalistic over there. They love money, so that is a decent place. So UAE, Mexico, and I mean El Salvador has to be near the top of the list. I haven't been there yet myself, so I can't talk too much about it, but so far, most of my year has been spent between Mexico and Dubai.
Yeah, I think to your question, Marjorie, I think Svetsky's point would be, we're fighting a pretty tough battle when you're fighting big bank and government. I liked what he said, where he said, we're going to try to bring over the people that want to be brought over, and have this way of thinking. But one piece of advice I would give, and I don't know if this is feasible for a lot of people listening, is right now get out of dense areas, man. Like get out of dense areas if you can. Like, so what I mean by that is if you live in a big city, try to get a little bit outside of the city. You might lose some conveniences as far as being able to walk to a coffee shop or a restaurant, but I would highly recommend trying to get a little bit of land, and just, God forbid something happens, you've got your own property. What we're seeing here in Australia now, is apartment buildings are being locked down if there's one case. So they can basically now go in and a 26 floor high rise, one case is in that building, they'll lock that whole building down for 14 days where you're not leaving, right? And they'll deliver food to you. So it's China-esque in a way that I wouldn't be surprised if it gets to that level here, even crazier. Like they've done it with, like I just said, the backpacker hostel here is in lockdown, and they're basically delivering food to the people. They have to self-isolate and test. So my recommendation would be, I think
Wow,
the big
that's crazy. That's crazy. I have no idea it was like China over there because China was doing that in early 2020, but I have no idea.
Yeah, no, it just broke today, down in, like I said, Byron Bay, which is, like I said, a pretty free hippie type town. So to happen there is kind of crazy, but I just don't, I just think big cities and dense areas are gonna be the most heavily targeted, because they can just claim like, oh, you're in a dense area, you're in a big building, you need to either self isolate, you need to quarantine, we're gonna lock down the building. Whereas if you've got your own house, at least worst case, you've got a property with some bit of land. There's no, they have no reason to remove you from that because you're not in a dense area. So that's just one thought process I've had over the last year, is going back traditionally to just being maybe 15, 20 minutes outside of a big city. You can access it when you need it, but you've got your own little sanctuary.
Yeah, no, Byron Bay is great. I spent like a week out there. It's not that dense, so it's a nice area.
Oh, it's built up now. It's gotten a bit
Yeah.
bigger, but the backpacker hostels are usually pretty dense, is what I'm saying. Anything with units and apartments and buildings where there's mass people in a small space, that they're the people that I think are going to be most heavily affected. And when we talk about that from an economic point of view, those people are usually, a lot of people live in that high density stuff, don't have a lot of funds to be able to escape, and that's the unfortunate reality for some of those people.
Yeah, one of my biggest fears actually, especially like, living here in Canada and given the situation where, um, you know, the government, federal government, and even the provincial ones, they've been hostile towards the unvaccinated people, right? Like, what happens, like, if there's um, supply shortage, because now they're also thinking of like ensuring that essential traveler non I mean essential workers who are traveling from like US to like Canada, they're going to be mandated to be vaccinated too at some point. So like what happens if like that causes a supply shortage, right? And it's winter time, and then something happens and you're like living in the city and you can't even like get important things or basic stuff that you need. Like what's his name, Francis Polio, he actually like tweeted about that, like something about like Atlas Shrug, and then like the power grid just like stops working. um
Yeah,
yeah, and he
power
was just
grids
like
are going to
talking
be
about like
fucked soon. That's
yeah.
the crazy part. I mean, they already are, and it's going to keep getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, like that goes back to my point of trying to, for those that can afford it, being somewhat self-sufficient, and whether you get some generators as a backup on your property, whether you're growing your own kind of food, so you've got something bare minimum if stuff does shut. We're seeing massive supply chain issues here in Australia, not so much food wise. Food has gone up a shitload, but we're seeing it in the building industry, like massive supply shortages, so that we can't really you can't even get lumber here for the most part to build. There's a massive backlog on just lumber, timber, right? So you look at that, and that's only going to be a matter of time till it affects other logistical outlets. And if there is a power grid collapse or downage, then your logistics for trucking, your logistics for moving food, moving commodities all around Australia, which generally has to be done by road, because it's such a big area, with only a few capital cities, there can be massive issues. So that goes back to my thinking of, once again, is getting away from dense areas so you can at least be kind of just quietly wait self-sufficiently growing your own kind of food and stuff.
Yeah, and this is already happening in South Africa. I mean, they have rolling blackouts. Their power grid is just not strong enough to support. And so I mean, South Africa is considered a developed country. It's a first world country. And in their major cities, not Cape Town, but Johannesburg, Pretoria, I mean, power just goes out almost every single day. And Johannesburg is a very dangerous city. And most houses there have their own electric fence around them. And they have to have your own generator to just keep that electric fence around your house active. It's kind of crazy there.
Yeah, I think that's really something to think about, especially like if you're living in Canada and the government is indifferent or hostile towards unvaccinated people, because it might get to a point where it's like, okay, we're in an emergency, right? Like we have an emergency situation, but then now they want to like prioritize the vaccinated people, right? And you're like a second class citizen. So then what do you do? So I think it's important to like, prepare for emergencies, and at the same time, like what Savetsky was like saying earlier, is start building networks of people, who can actually help you, who understands your situation, who are resourceful and can help you. Because personally, that's one of the things that I've been doing, and I've been lucky enough to have met a few Bitcoiners here, including Tone, and they've been very helpful. You know, giving me ideas and tips on what I can do to
Okay.
handle what's going on right now in Canada. So thanks,
Yo,
guys.
so Andrew, I want to be really respectful of your time. I know we're a little over right now. I guess unless you have to run, would love to, just kind of close out the conversation. Maybe we can just kind of go to last words, and we can close this one out.
Sorry, yeah, I've got a few more minutes and then I have to take off. But yeah, I appreciate everyone letting me on. It's been a pretty, I think, having these kind of conversations, whether people listening agree or disagree, I think it's just good to actually have these conversations, which we don't really see in the mainstream. Different points of view and as to why this, why that, why not this, why not that. I think these are very valuable for some people. So I hope people listening have taken, even if you just took one thing out of everything we spoke about. I think it's important. I know I've taken a few things from this conversation and got a good book recommendation as well. So it's all about learning and moving forward. I think But yeah, I mean, my philosophy right now, I guess my MO is to just kind of lie in wait and just see what's going on in the world right now, because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better for the next couple of months. We're in a real interesting time in Australia. I think we're going to know the lay of the land probably by January, February, with going back into winter. And then yeah, it's just going to be a matter of time to
Hey, can I
figure out
ask
what's
one
going
last
on.
question?
Yeah, go for it.
And can I ask one last question? Have you thought about going into politics? I mean, you're pretty well known, and you can have momentum.
I mean, yeah, no, look, like putting your family through that isn't the best, and then the political landscape here is I don't think I would last. I think I'd be outed pretty quickly by generally either your own party or someone within politics. I don't think the people would be too against it, but look, I'm not the most politically correct. I'm kind of outspoken, so that causes a bit of an issue, especially mainstream wise. But I've given it thought previously, but
Hey, if Trump can be elected in the U.S., I think politically correct is kind of flexible these days on getting into politics.
The
yeah,
U.S.
to
is
an
a very
extent,
different place.
Yeah, US, Australia is much different. It's much different. But look, the way it works here, it's not as easy as just getting elected and being a big time senator, premier, or you got to kind of work your way up through the minority parties, and then it's just not something that I want to invest my time to. And just dealing with, I just don't do well with political rhetoric. I'm kind of probably much like most people in this room. Like, I ask a question, I want to answer. I don't want a 15-minute spiel, and then I'm like, wait, did you even answer the question? You know what I mean? So I wouldn't do well, because I would just literally be in Parliament saying, like, dude, answer the fucking question. Like, you've given us 15 minutes of shit, and then we all know how well that would go down in mainstream media.
So I mean, Andrew, yeah, the politics thing is interesting. Politics have become very popular within the Bitcoin space, just in terms of trying to help politicians see the value in Bitcoin and encourage them to protect it. Um, I'm not sure if that has a place in Australia, if that helps at all with the overall situation. But I guess I want to give you back the mic. I think you were saying, you got something out of this conversation. Definitely hope you get the sovereign individual out of this conversation. But yeah,
Yeah. No, I've just ordered it. I just ordered the book on the Amazon
money.
monolith of a
Let's go.
website. Man, if you go on Amazon, have you seen how much the hard copy version is of that?
Oh, it's really expensive, but I actually I think I've purchased like over 50 copies and I've just given them out. So I've used Amazon to do that.
Yeah, the hardcover right now, for those wondering, is $838. So very, very expensive book. Paperback's at $76. So a very expensive book. So must be well worth the read.
Yeah, man, they're expensive in Australia. But yeah, no, I'm a stan, if you will, of that book.
Yeah,
Um,
I just got the budget paperback, so we'll be right.
yes, all right. Hey, keep stacking sats, my friend.
That's it.
Um, Awesome. Well, I mean, hey, fam, this is a great conversation. Again, Andrew, really appreciate your time and the flexibility with organizing it beneath the hood. It took a few tries, but it was definitely on me. And Andrew, you're the man. I really appreciate everything that you do. I've really been appreciating you. While you were on the Warriors and on the Lakers and in the NBA, but even more now with your presence on social media in this kind of climate. So thank you so much, and yeah, again, thanks again for being on.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Pleasure talking to everyone.